Our first speaker knows quite a lot about that. He is the research director at the Harris School of Public Policy at the University of Chicago, about 5 miles that way. More to the point, though, he has used social tools to do small little things like re-elect a president of the United States. He is also the co-founder of a startup, EdgeFlip, that's about taking those tools of social engagement and data analysis and bringing them to the broader world of not-for-profits. So please join me in welcoming Rayid Ghani.
Thanks, Tom. It's really good to be here. I live in Chicago, so it's really good to see people coming here to hear about these things. So Rayid Ghani, as Tom said, I am sort of in a strange place. I teach at University of Chicago, and intersection of computer science and public policy. And you wouldn't think there would be an intersection, but it's sort of, I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I also started a company, EdgeFlip, which really came out of some of the work we were doing in Obama re-election campaign, which many of the companies around in Chicago recently have come up with. So I want to kind of take you guys back a couple of years, year and a half, where you guys have sort of heard about the hype around the Obama campaign, and the media needed a story, so they made data the story of the Obama campaign. That's what won in the election, and it sort of gets old and boring, but it's sort of, you have to reiterate, no, that wasn't the magic of the Obama campaign. The magic was really people who were going out in the millions trying to convince everybody else. That was sort of the movement that, we had 1.5 million volunteers making more than 100 million contacts through phone calls and knocking on doors. And that was the real magic. What we were doing in the back was kind of just directing them into the right places. And I think that's sort of the idea behind using data to create large movements. The movement's going to happen by itself, but if you want a specific outcome, you need to be smart about how you direct that. So when we were starting out, one of the things we were really good at in the elections was really building these teams. We had volunteer teams all over the country. And they were great. We would sort of figure out which person should talk to whom, and they would talk to them and convince them, to persuade them to change their mind, to become volunteers, to vote for us. What we sort of realized that when we did all that, we were really missing a key demographic. We were missing people under 35. Because one, our channels initially were door knocks. So most of those people are not at home in daytime. The second channel was phone calls, right? We made 100 million phone calls to landline phones, again, in daytime. Under 35, not gonna get them. So then we became, we were spending about, $500 million on TV ads. So let's do that on live TV again, and nothing, we're not getting these people. So we also were using direct mail. We send millions of pieces of direct mail, and we can sort of talk about how effective that is, and actually is effective on a certain demographic. But again, not people under 35. So I'm kind of expanding my definition of younger people. And so we really realized that we only had the right contact information for about half of those people we wanted to reach. And of those, fewer than half were actually reachable. When we called them, they wouldn't pick up the phone. When we went to their homes, they weren't there. When we had live TV ads, because they don't watch live TV, sending them direct mail was useless. So we were really in a bind. We didn't know how to get to them. Now, the obvious answer you sort of think about was kind of, the answer we came up with was obviously, sort of Facebook, right? 90% of these people are sitting on Facebook. And that's an obvious and easy answer, but it's very hard to take action on that. When you try to reach people on Facebook, so what was our typical Facebook strategy was, let's put something on Facebook and see what happens. And that's apparently the state of the art right now. You put a post on, you try big images and small images, put a video or and see what happens. And that's really not very effective, because the people who you're sort of trying to reach are kind of already the converted. People who are your fans on Facebook. So we had about, at that point, 25 million fans. And the largest city in that fan list was Jakarta. So not very useful when targeting people to go out and vote or change their mind. And so we had access to Facebook, but we didn't have access to the right people. It turned out people who were right around us that we were constantly bombarding were not the people we wanted to really target for those things. We needed to be much more precise. They were kind of spread in different places. They had this network, but we didn't have access to that. We couldn't just take a person on Facebook and message them. That doesn't really work. You need to figure out a better way of doing it. We had to sort of figure out, okay, these are the people, I need to target these 300,000 people in Ohio for getting them to go out and vote. And then these 200,000 people need to be persuaded to vote. And these 100,000 people need to be registered to vote. And here are the 50,000 people we need to ask for fundraising. And these 20,000 people need to be asked to volunteer. And even if you figure that out, what we knew that if we as an organization, as sort of the large umbrella, asked them, that's not really effective. Most of these things happen through peers and word of mouth. And us telling people you should go and vote was not a very effective strategy. So what we ended up doing was creating this initial tool we called targeted sharing. And the motivation behind this tool was that we have these people we need to reach. We know who we need to reach somehow, but we don't have a direct connection to them. We can't talk to them directly. But we have this inner circle. We have these volunteers. We have people who already like us, support us, care about us. And right now, we're kind of only asking them online for money. We send them emails. We send about 5 billion, literally 5 billion emails. And we wouldn't really ask them much else online. All the other volunteer work was really happening offline. Go knock on doors. Go make phone calls. What if we figured out what their social network, what their social graph was worth? And what if we figured out if they have any friends that we should be targeting through them? And what we were able to really figure out was that the key that we realized after running some experiments was that basically everybody was an influencer. The model of, well, you have these 10 big influencers in the world, and if you just go through them, you can convince a lot of people. It sort of didn't really happen. What happened was we figured out everybody influences somebody at some point around some issue. So everybody is sort of a local influencer. You might be one in your neighborhood. You might be one on an online forum around a specific issue. That influence might only be short-lived. It might be for a month. It might be for a day. It might be for a year. It might be a lifetime. But everybody has some sort of an influence. And if only we can figure out how to really capture it, how to detect it, and how to make them take some action based of that, we could really get to the people we really need to reach. So we built this tool called target sharing. And the idea behind that tool was we would ask our inner sort of circle, our supporters, our volunteers, our donors who really cared about us, would ask them to allow us to take a look at their social graph on Facebook. Say, hey, if you why don't you authorize our Facebook app? And if you do that, give us access to your social network. And then we would look at that social network and do two things. One, for each person, we would try to figure out how useful is this person to us for a specific ask. So if elections were happening starting in Ohio next week, we'd figure out who are the people we would want to go and vote in elections who are likely to be persuaded. But that might be, if you have 500 friends, you might have 200 friends who live in Ohio or 100 friends who live in Ohio. Of those, only 64 might be targets for us, which we need to reach. Now, you may not be able to do anything about those 64. So the next layer that came in was we were looking at who are the people this person can actually influence. And generally, influence is sort of a very abstract notion, right? It's very hard to define it. It's very fuzzy. For us, influence was a very specific, very concrete idea. It was that if this person asks you to take some action, if you take it, you're an influencer. If you don't take it, you're not an influencer. And that's not a general definition, because sometimes you're really thinking about a more longer-term view where you kind of slowly get them to the point where they take some action. But in our case, we're kind of looking for fairly short-term feedback. And so defining influence in a very short-term way, we wanted to kind of figure out, if you have these 64 friends we need to reach, who are the ones you can influence? And once we would find those people, we can then ask you to ask these 10 people to take some action, to do something, whether it's, hey, fill out this voter registration form before next week, or go in and vote next week, or sign up to volunteer in this event that's happening. And what we found was that really the key was that all the people we're trying to reach, a lot of these people who are, who support Obama, who have sort of, feel good about it, they have the right intentions, but intentions aren't really enough to make them take some action. And what was needed was this little nudge that's influence. So if we find the right person, that person can kind of convert their intentions into actual concrete actions, which is what we really cared about. Because intentions weren't that valuable. You might like us, support us, and give us all the moral support we need, but unless you donate money or you volunteer or you go and actually vote, that doesn't really help us. So what we were kind of figure out is how do we figure out who these influencers are or who they can influence, and then kind of persuade them to take some action that then gets the people outside who we need to reach taking the same action. And the key for us was that we figured out that sort of data and technology were sort of really good tools, enabling tools. They're not enough by themselves, but they're really good enabling tools that help us figure out what this influence is. So here's an example of what we did, right? We asked people to come and authorize the Facebook app, and when they authorized the app, we gave them suggestions of friends they should share something with. It might be a video, it might be a voter registration form. And initially, we just randomized it. We just told them to share with random people. And the idea behind that was we could see who is actually sharing and who's not sharing. And the second level, when somebody gets shared with some action, if they take the action, what that allows us to do is basically build what's called a predictive model of what kind of people are influenced, what kind of people are not influenced. And what that allowed us to do is build this sort of kind of a mega influence model, which basically helped us figure out that if you give me two people, I can give you the probability that when this person asks this person to do something, they'll do it. Right? Once I have that, that's basically influence. I know now if you come in and you want to help us, I can look at your friend list of 1,000 people and tell you which 20 are likely to be influenced by you. And if I know that, I can cross that with people I need to reach, and now I can show you the 10 people I want you to do something about. And that was sort of the key. And when we sort of released this tool after building it, we had about 1 million people during the elections who used it. Now, 1 million doesn't seem like a large number, especially when you're dealing with the entire country. But the way this works is that if you have access to the network of 1 million people, each of us on average have about 400 to 500 friends. Some people have several thousand friends, some people have tens of friends. Or none, but they're, I'm not a Facebook person. But on average, we have 400, 500 people who we are connected to in Facebook. So 1 million people opened us up to about 200 million people in the country, which meant that we could take these 200 million people and pick and choose. We can say, these people are the ones I want in this state for this particular ask. These people I want for a different ask. And then from my million circle, the inner circle, I could figure out which people should I ask this person to persuade. So tomorrow I might ask them to persuade these people to go and vote. And then last week I asked them to set a different set of people to volunteer or to fundraise. And what that sort of, when we tried these things, what we found out was that, that was a much, much, much more effective way of getting people to take action compared to the Obama campaign putting out messages themselves. So we, as a large organization, could say whatever we wanted, but we weren't really influencers. We were just kind of broadcasting it pretty wide and trying to just get people, paying attention. But that wasn't as effective, even close to as effective, as us asking our core supporters to talk to their friends. And what we also noticed was that if you do this smartly, you actually get much better results. So if I suggest to you friends that you should take some action with, randomly or not, just kind of pretty ad hoc, I get, because you care about me and you sort of support me, you'll share. You'll do whatever I ask you to do because you've kind of already bought in, you want us to win. But, and so if I ask you to give sort of, if I spend a lot more time and money building this tool and kind of give you better suggestions, you're just 10% more likely to share. So not a huge number. What's much more effective is when you ask somebody to take an action, you get about 5 times as many people to take action if you've picked the right people. Because think about it this way, right? If you're getting a message from from a person you haven't really talked to, you're not really influenced by, you're gonna ignore it because you're not really paying attention. But if I get the right person to talk to you, people are 5 times as likely to take some action and do something, right? So there are a lot of other lessons we learned. Sort of personalization was really helpful just because it works in the corporate world. Why should we not personalize things when we're dealing with large social movements? So if we really personalize things, it really worked. The better we got at sort of picking and choosing the people, the more effective our methods got. So I don't want to get into too much detail. I kind of have a couple minutes left. So what I want to sort of, when that sort of finished, the idea behind some of the things I'm doing now is we wanted to take that and say, hey, this was very useful for us to run sort of a national large campaign. How would we turn this into a tool that smaller or more local or nonprofits, advocacy groups, charities who want to engage their audiences better, who want to really create volunteers who can be online advocates, how do they really take this and how do we extend this? So we've been sort of building a product out of that we're working with nonprofits and charities and advocacy groups to kind of take this idea and enable them to use it easily, cheaply, and sort of scalably, so you don't have to do much. So that's sort of one of the things I'm doing. I want to kind of end, I have a minute left, with a different kind of movement that I'm working on. And that is sort of targeted towards the same set of people, just a narrower set. So in my life at the University of Chicago, I run a program called Data Science for Social Good. That's actually running this summer. And what I'm trying to do is create a set of people, mostly sort of college students, grad students, who have data skills, technology skills, and care about the world. So they're not the people, or they are the kind of people who would go to Facebook and Google and improve our search results by this much, or make sure that I click on one more ad every day so that we can make some more money. I'm trying to get the same people to come over to Chicago for the summer. So I get about 50 people from around the world. They're all sort of data scientists, whatever that means. And they come to Chicago and spend the summer working on data-intensive sort of projects with social impact. So we create projects with nonprofits, governments, and we spend 3 months kind of working on these projects around advocacy, around improving how a nonprofit functions, around healthcare, education, energy, public safety, international development. So I basically leave you guys with sort of 2 things, right? One, if you are sort of a nonprofit or advocacy group, you're sort of struggling with getting younger people engaged and kind of, it's the typical, you have your supporters who give you money, but you're not asking for anything else and you want to kind of get to the larger group of people, happy to talk to you more. Or if you have interesting problems where you think, you could fit into the summer program in this way, where we're looking for partners to work with, because we've got funding to get 50 students over in the summer working on these projects. So if you're interested in any of those things around sort of advocacy, engagement on social media, or data-intensive projects with sort of a social impact, and you have projects that you can work with us, come talk to me, come find me. But thank you.
So let me get this straight. I'm hearing data mining, so I'm hearing big databases. I'm hearing filter and search and match, so I'm hearing massive amounts of computational resources. I'm putting all this together with sort of my 2000 era technology brain on, and I'm thinking, this has got to be a lot of money. This has got to be big iron technology. Is it? Or is this something that is more affordable?
I guess I would say, I don't know if it's fortunately, unfortunately, it isn't that expensive and it isn't that big, right? Because a lot of this technology exists today. It's fairly cheap, it's fairly affordable. I think there are sort of 3 problems that come around when you're trying to do this work. One is people. You don't have access to these people. Most of the people who can do this kind of work are being sucked into bigger problems, right? So they're being sucked into problems where there's tons of data and they're being attracted by that. And that's not because they think that's a more important problem, it's because that's all they know about. We as a community don't really expose our problems to these people very well. We don't talk about our problems the right way, and if you don't attract them, so I think that's one problem, is people. Second problem is that there aren't enough proof points, there aren't enough examples. If you hear about so you often hear about, the Obama campaign, right? And you think, oh, well, they had $1 billion. I don't have $1 billion. What if I want to do this? And half of our $1 billion was spent on TV ads. So you're not doing that. You can do that with much, much, much less money. So a lot of the effective tools that we had built, especially on the technology side, were not very expensive. A lot of them were open source things. A lot of them were things we just kind of built together with a few people. So it's not expensive. It's fairly affordable. You just kind of have to find the resources, the people resources to really help you do this work.
And your summer program is part of that. Are you finding data scientists? Are you finding coders who are attracted by these kind of problems versus saying, you know, I am going to go improve Netflix's algorithm by X% and make, you know, 6 or 7 figure money next year?
I mean, they could use better algorithms. I mean, we all know, you know, how hard it is to find a good movie on Netflix. So lots of social good comes out of it, you know, people. But it's a challenge. I think what I realized was my initial reaction, or my prediction was, these kids are not going to be interested, and calling them kids, they're mostly, you know, grad students, because there's not enough money right now, and because it's not very sexy to go work with a nonprofit. And what I found was that that's not the case. They weren't interested because they just didn't know that these problems existed, that there was data. So last year, when I launched this program, it was a very last-minute program. We sort of advertised March 16th and told people to apply by April 1st. And I got 600 and something applications from graduate students from, you know, around the country. We were picking about 30 students, 35. So huge demand. This year, again, we've got 50 really smart people, you know, a mile from here, working on projects with nonprofits. So I think there are enough people out there. I'm not saying 100% of them will come. There are enough people out there who are really interested, and most of them, you know, I think that's a common thread. You know, skill-based volunteering has kind of been, it's not even volunteering, you're being paid, but people want something more than just to go paint houses. They have certain skills, and they want to use those skills to help causes that they care about. Today, when they go to those causes, they don't really get that back from them. When they ask them, hey, how can I help you? The answer still is, oh, well, can you paint some houses? And that's not what they want. So we're seeing a lot of people who are extremely excited about doing this work. They care about impact more than they can about anything else, and they want to do what they can. And I think that's the beginning of, so we started this last year. There's several other universities who are jumping in. There's lots of other organizations. So I think it's getting to the point where people are, they want to use their skills. And if you can show them a way to make an impact, they're willing to sacrifice a lot of other things to do that.
I'm struck by something. You're working in the School of Public Policy at UChicago, not in the School of Computer Science. There's a thread running through the 3 speakers this afternoon. All of them sort of started their careers one place, but ended up someplace else. Do you see that in the sort of students you're getting for your summer projects? And what do you think that has allowed you to do, sort of being at the margin, this overlap of a couple different worlds?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in both worlds, right? So I work in an institute called Computation Institute at the university, and I'm also in the public policy school. And I do it because I think that's the fun and exciting place, right? The intersection of the two. So we were talking about this earlier. We're starting a graduate program this fall, which is joint between computer science and public policy. It's because we want more people who have the computational and statistical background with the interest and skills in policy to go out into government, into nonprofits, into places where people are thinking about social causes. And that's the kind of people we're attracting to the summer program. So right now, that hybrid person doesn't exist. You don't have one person who has these skills. So what we did instead was we have about, you know, a third of the people, or 40% from computer science backgrounds, a third of the people from statistics, a third of the people from social sciences, public policy, economics. And the idea is to build these teams together so they understand each other, they understand their, and that's really exciting to see all these people coming together. Because if you're really going to make real change, you need all those skills in the same place.
The team, not the person.
Right, and eventually the person has to be exposed to all of them. They can't be an expert in all of them. So our idea is to sort of create these teams that can work together. And it is as much useful for us to train these people as it is for our partners in government and nonprofit to see how to work with them, because they've never really had exposure to them before. So absolutely, I think the space of you know, most of the interesting things are happening when you apply technologies to a new area. And policy, I don't mean necessarily sort of the public policy at the government level, even at an individual city level or a social, a nonprofit level, how do you design your programs? How do you figure out if you're having impact? How do you treat each client as a nonprofit differently? How do you personalize your interactions? That's policy. How do you, and that's getting more and more personalized as we start dealing with data, because what data allows us to do is basically personalize at scale.
So that actually ties to one of the questions that came in from social Q&A. And for those of you online, remember, it's just below the stream. Many nonprofits don't have the digital skills to even understand what questions can be answered. Mm-hmm. How do you attack that? How do you build digital sophistication into your organization?
Tough question.
Yeah, and you've got 10 seconds.
Oh, 10 seconds, that's easy. I mean, I think you have to take some of the challenge with a lot of the digital tools is you don't know the answers, which means you need to experiment to learn the answers. And if you're a small organization, you can't experiment very much. Just because if you're running experiments in social media and you have 300 people or 10,000 people who see your message, you can't run an experiment to test different ideas. So you kind of have to rely on larger organizations. And it's sort of, in my mind, it's the larger organization's responsibility to learn things and then pass them down to the smaller ones. And it might be the smaller ones start combining their skills together and say, you know what, one, we can't hire 5 people by ourselves. How about we hire a team of 5 people that's floating? And then when we run these experiments, we consolidate and we're not competing with each other as much as we're competing with the rest of the world. So how about we put our experiments together and our data together? And I think once that starts happening, which is hard because everybody thinks they're special and their data is so special, but it's not. Everybody has the same problems at some level. And I think when that starts happening, that's when you can see real change start happening. Without that, you're kind of all in silos doing different things, and nothing is going to happen if we keep doing that.
Fascinating. We'll get to some more of the questions back in the Tumblr room. Right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.